For those of you just joining us, we'll be starting the panel session shortly. Just bear with us and we'll get underway in a few moments. See a few more people are trickling in. My name is Mark Lomas of Probrand. We will be starting in a few moments. Just going to wait for a few more people to arrive, let everybody take their virtual seats, and then we'll get the panel session started. I can see quite a few more people joining us now. So thank you very much for joining our session today. We'll be kicking off in just a few moments and we'll get things moving. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much. Right, yes, my name is Mark Lomas. I'm a Cloud Solutions Architect at Probrand, and welcome to our panel session today, Security Risks in Cloud Computing and How to Avoid Them. Got a fairly short session today, about 20 minutes in time, so we're going to be fairly rapid fire this morning rather. So we'll get underway as quickly as possible. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right into it. I'm joined today by Mark Davies and Amy Luttwak. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to hand over briefly to our panelists today to introduce themselves and to give you a brief overview on their background. Mark, if I might start with you.
Very kind, thank you. So my name is Mark Davies. I'm Managing Director of a company called Westcoast Cloud. My background is about 25 years of hosting. So I used to work in a reseller doing hosting, so a long time ago. But the last 6 years, I've been running this business all around cloud computing, and we've got around 14,500 end user customers. So we get a good mix, good flavor of risks that are there from small to large customers.
Fantastic. And Amy, if I could ask for the same from you, a brief introduction of yourself, please.
Sure. Great to be here. I'm Amy, the CTO and co-founder of Wiz. Wiz is one of what we call the next generation of cloud security. It's today the fastest growing cyber startup. And what we do is we look at cloud environments of customers and analyze them in a single click across their entire step to really understand where is the critical risk in the cloud and simplify the complexity.
Thank you very much for that. So obviously cloud computing has become more mainstream for many organizations, and over the last couple of years, especially as we've had to face the challenges of COVID, home working, hybrid working. A lot of people sort of view that we're now in a new era of work. And regardless of your position on this as to whether or not you feel that the best place for your employees to work is based in an office or based at home or with flexibility of the two, cloud computing is certainly the mainstay of IT these days. And of course, cyber criminals have moved their approach to deal with this new reality as well, to exploit the fact that people are in the cloud. So a question for both of you really is, what do you see as being the most common threats in this space? And if I could start with you, Amy.
Yeah, so cloud is amazing. It allows you to move faster and to build more, to be more productive. The risks today in the cloud come from the complexity of cloud. Cloud allows you to move so fast, to build whatever you want. What it means is that you can build a database and accidentally expose it in a few seconds, right? So the major risk in cloud today is the complexity, and the complexity that allows me to do mistakes, right? And the second risk is that the architecture in the cloud is very different from legacy, right? And if you think about legacy architectures, when you build it and when you secure it, then you won't get a good result in the cloud. Just as an example, if you think about networks and you have two networks, dev network and production network, and they're isolated, this is great for on legacy. But on cloud, if you don't think about identities, then you might have an extra identity in dev that can take over production. So you really need to understand the concept of cloud. That's the second major risk, really understanding how to build the secure architecture in the cloud.
Mark, would you agree with that? What would you say are the most common threats in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. What Ami's talking about there, complexity. I think that the ease of use of spinning something up inside the cloud, whether it's Azure, AWS, whichever hyperscaler you use, people have an idea that once I've spun something up, because it's Amazon or because it's Microsoft, it's secure. And that's not the case, because you've still got to go through the old adage of making sure you secure each layer, whether that's the network, whether that's the application, or the actual operating system that they're using. So, still the biggest risk that there is the people. And people make mistakes. So, and I think that's the thing is how you mitigate against those mistakes, making sure that you've got multi-factor authentication as a minimum. So the whole, one of the things that Ami talked about there, identity management, I think that's going to be a much, much bigger play as people go through the next few years, is how do I secure the identity of the people that are logging in, especially with the remote workers that you were talking about earlier.
And just staying with you for a moment, Mark, is it therefore quite important for organizations to have a strategic vision for their cloud migration and adoption approach? Is that something that's important and that can therefore really help with security?
Absolutely. And I think that the challenge that there is if somebody's not been bitten by something, then it doesn't, if something doesn't hurt, then it's almost like it doesn't have any value. And it's a bit like life insurance when you're 20. When you're 20, obviously you're going to live forever. So what do you need life insurance for? And that's a bit like how some businesses look at security. It's a cost to mitigate against something that's never happened. So it's how much money do I spend on securing myself? So it's a really difficult question to answer. But when somebody is bitten by it, then and you don't need to be a massive organization. We had an example of a customer, that's in professional services. So it's sort of like 25, 30 years of business, but they're still recovering costs of sort of like 3 years ago. And they've estimated that in time, effort, money to mitigate against this from 3 years ago, roughly around £500,000. So now it could have been mitigated at the time, but they hadn't felt the pain. Now they have. Obviously, security is much, much further up that strategic stack, as you talk about.
Just turning to you, Ami, for a moment. One of the concerns that can sometimes occur in many organizations is shadow cloud and shadow IT. For the uninitiated, can you outline for us what this is all about and what kind of risks it can pose?
Yeah, I think it comes directly from the fact that in the cloud, right, you can do whatever you want. So there's a shift of control from usually you had a control for the security team, you had a data center, you control the firewall, and the control shifts to the developers, right? Now, we can call it, there's a shadow cloud and shadow IT. In my view today, the situation is that the security team, they don't even know what's running in the cloud. So everything becomes shadow. It's very hard for them to exactly know what the developer is actually using. Hey, maybe there's a new machine learning service in AWS. Would you know that someone is starting to use it? It's really, really hard for security today to unshadow what's really been happening, because it's also shifting so fast. And there's so many dev teams, right? That there is a lot of, I would say, shadow for them in the cloud. And really one of the key questions is, as a security team, how do I know what's going on? What the developers are doing? How do I cooperate with them to know what's happening and make sure that it's okay?
And are there any sort of areas where you feel that people might be able to find some solutions here? Is this a question of focusing in on, well, you mentioned identity management earlier. Is it more about device management? Is it about the data itself? Or is it more a case of all three? You've got to be focusing on everything here to be able to bring that control back.
So I think that in my perspective, and again, that's also the problem that we as a company tries to solve, is the biggest question that you need to ask yourselves as a company, not only as a security team. Number one is, first of all, how do I work dev and security together? But my role as security, I need to detect the critical risks that I currently have in my cloud environment. That's my role, because my role is to continuously reduce risk, right? So yes, you need tools around identity, you need tools around threat detection for devices, you need tools around code scanning. But ultimately, the goal of cloud security and what a cloud security tool should do is be able to assess the entire environment and flag for you critical risks you have to fix, because that's actually what is your goal. Your goal is to reduce the risk continuously in your environments.
Mark, a recent report from KPMG and Oracle threat report found that 92% of organizations were concerned that individuals or departments were in violation of security policies for their cloud applications. Where do you think this concern is stemming from, and how can IT professionals go about resolving them?
Yeah, I suppose that this comes back to what I mentioned earlier. So in a long time ago, about 15 or so years ago, one of my roles was as an ISO 27001. I implemented it in my previous business. I actually wrote my dissertation on university around security and around this idea of how much money people spend on how much money people spend on security at the time when things were we were going through a sort of like global crash. And there's this people, process, technology triangle that you have, and you can secure one area of it, but if one of the other areas isn't as secure, as in, you can put processes in place like an ISO system, you can have the technology in place, but if people aren't fundamentally following it, then the other two things become irrelevant. You have to have the three things very closely aligned together. I mean, a simple example of this is, when you say to people, make sure you lock your machine when you walk away from it. As an ISO manager that I was at the time, I was constantly going around the business going, you've left your machine unlocked, you've left your machine unlocked, because people just get forgetful around it. It's not necessarily as important to the people on the ground as the people that are running the business, or the people that are going to feel that pain of if they are hacked. So I think that coming back to it, it's making sure those people are well educated in all levels of, if you've got access to secure data or information that's important to the business, you have to follow the processes that are set in place and the technology. That you're hoping that the tech team and the developer team will do their job to secure that as much as they possibly can, but they can't mitigate against people. That's always going to be the challenge.
Ami, just another question for you here. We've touched upon identity management earlier. And of course, we think about users, their passwords, their logins, etc., and that malicious hackers will go after this with brute force and other techniques. Are there things that we can do besides, for example, the implementation of multi-factor authentication to help improve identity management, identity protection, and protecting our logins? Are there any other things that we need to be looking at doing here?
Yeah, and I think when I look into the cloud and I say, okay, what is the main difference from legacy environment to cloud? It's identity, right? Now, but it's not user identity. It's not only, hey, do I have MFA? Do I have a strong passwords? No, the key about cloud is also identities of the entities themselves. The entire cloud, all of the VMs, all of the containers, all of the services, they have cloud identities, right? In order for you to detect risks. And let me give you a simple example. One of the biggest attacks in cloud, the Capital One attack, you had a VM that had some kind of vulnerability, and this VM had access to a large number of S3 buckets, a lot of storage, right? The problem there wasn't about MFA. The problem that you had a VM that is exposed to the internet and has access to a lot of data, right? In order for you to minimize this kind of risk, you need to analyze who has access to what. You need to understand identities in the cloud, not only for users. You need to detect those critical focus points of, hey, this machine has a vulnerability, but also has access to my most sensitive data. I really need to fix it.
Absolutely. So I think at this point, I'm just going to take a moment to let people know if you've got any questions you'd like to put forward today through to either myself or our panelists. Please do feel free to pop them in the chat. And if we've got time today, we'll try and get through some of those if we can. So if you just click on the chat button in the Zoom session, that should allow you to access the chat window and put some of your questions through. Mark, turning to you again now. A lot of the cloud solutions that are out there, particularly from some of the major well-known vendors in this space, will have their own security and monitoring tools as standard. Is that enough? Or do we, if we sign up for one of these providers and we say, okay, well, we've got some security tools there, job done, sorted, or should we be looking to go further to be able to extend security from, making use of additional tools or additional technologies here?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the $1 million question is, I mean, if you look at containers inside, whether it's inside Azure, inside AWS or Google, are they enough? Because what you can do is you can have a hypervisor layer, whether it's Citrix, whether it's VMware, which will give you another layer of security for that container that now sits inside one of these other things as well. So that now I've got not just one container that I have to get through, it could be two containers, because I've got an extra layer of protection. But of course, there's a cost that comes with that as well. So it's all about that cost benefit analysis to say, what am I putting in the cloud? And if it was compromised, would that affect me in a way? Some people will obviously have connectivity that will go from their on-prem into the cloud. Can I be compromised back onto my own network if somebody did a reverse through my cloud infrastructure to get onto my on-prem stuff? So it's very much a case of if you've got something that is potentially critical, then yes, I think that you do have to look beyond the tools and capabilities that are inside the hyperscalers, because they have got some great stuff that's there, but if it's not utilized in the right way, and again, when I come back to multi-factor authentication and people, we had an example of a partner that had multi-factor authentication enabled for their customer, but didn't have a specific account that it was enabled against. So they had an admin account. And what happened is that somebody called the number because it was against a mobile phone, and somebody at the other end just went, yeah, approve. But it wasn't for somebody that was approved to actually ask for that too. But somebody on the phone has just gone, yeah, that's fine. But what they've done is they've now allowed someone else to have access when they shouldn't have done. So you can have the tools in place, but if the people don't follow that process of what they should be doing to check, or not to have an admin account, everything falls over.
I suppose one of the issues here is also as well as looking at what the basic security tools are and what the components are, we also have to have a think about, are we needing to consider regulatory compliance issues, things like that. And of course, for some organizations, it can be particularly challenging. So just a question for you, Ami. Some organizations, they have to think quite carefully, not just about what the data is, but even things like the physical location of that data. They might have certain regulations that say, oh, it has to stay in a particular geographic location, or it has to stay in country, that kind of thing. If you're moving to the cloud, does that have a big impact on managing compliance? Do you think it makes it easier or harder? What would your thoughts be around that?
So as everything in cloud, you have to rethink about how you do compliance, right? And how you do security. And by the way, also, and it goes back to what Mark said, it's really a people, tools, and process problem, right? So is compliance different in cloud? Yes. Is it harder? No. If you use the right tools and you have the right partnership, right? So remember, you have to work in partnership with developers. It's a major change in how you do everything. That the security teams needs to really work together with developers and find tools that can actually show them exactly what are the issues they have to fix, right? Now, in terms of compliance, in some senses, it becomes easier, because if you have a system that understands the cloud, right? Not just gives you millions of alerts, really understands, hey, this data resides here and has access from this region, and it was copied here. So the cloud allows for automation that potentially makes compliance much easier, right? But you have to change the way that you work inside the company, you have to build a strategy for cloud, and you have to bring tools that are more of next generation that understand the cloud environment deeply. Otherwise, you will be much worse.
Coming towards the end of the session now, so I'm going to sort of close things out with a sort of closing session for, again, a closing question for both of you. And really, it's the sort of standard default question for a panel session like this, which is, what would your final takeaway be for customers looking to maintain robust security in their cloud IT space? So, Ami, if I could start with you.
Yeah, so I think the biggest question the cloud security team needs to ask is, are we able today, across our identity, network exposure, secrets, data, all of the pillars, vulnerabilities, patch management, all of the pillars of security in the cloud environment, do we have a good method to detect the risks today and communicate them well to the developers to fix them? So the way I would measure myself as security, do I know my top 10 critical risks across all of my environments right now, across vulnerabilities, identities, exposure, and am I able to make sure the developers fix them in a month, right? Do I have this really powerful process? If it's not there, then you have to go back to not only tools, processes, executive support, and all of that. That's the basis, continuous improvement.
And Mark, over to you, same question.
Yeah, I think the thing for me is, the long and short of it, if somebody wants in, they're getting in. You know, they'll be state sponsored, or somebody that's got some very incredible tools. But smaller businesses will think, why are they going to target me? They're not going to. But there will be people that are just looking around just to see who's there, who's available. It's a bit like somebody that's a burglar on your house. What do? They just go and try the door. If the door's open, they'll come in. If you've got a dog, the dog barks, they go somewhere else. It's very much the same way with the cloud security. Is what you're trying to do is stop opportunistic people that are using some simple tools, some simple data, because you can go on the dark web and you can pick this stuff up fairly easily. And it's trying to stop those opportunistic people from getting access to your and it might just be the odd £1,000 or £5,000, whatever they're looking to do to get some money out of you. But you stop them first, and that level of security needs to be your baseline. That would be my suggestion: is find a partner that can help you reach that baseline, because it's super, super important, and it's going to get more and more rife as time goes on.
Thank you very much for that, guys. I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. So I'd just like to thank Mark Davies of Westcoast and Ami Luttwak of Wiz for taking the time to come and speak to us today. I hope that the information that you've heard has been useful to you. My name is Mark Lomas, Cloud Solutions Architect at Probrand. That concludes our panel session for today, but please do stick with us on the Cybersecurity Live portal. There's lots more events taking place throughout the day. So if you have a look at the agenda section, you'll see all of the events coming through right through to the rest of the afternoon. If you do have any further questions for us, please do drop us a line at Probrand and we'll be happy to engage. But in the meantime, thanks for joining us and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.